Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Emily Carter wasn't at a briefing table. She wasn't in uniform, and this wasn't a war zone. Not yet. Just a warm San Diego night and a strip mall with taco joints, tired streetlights, and sleepy traffic. But what happened next would echo louder than any siren she'd ever heard. She'd just finished her shift, 12 hours on call. A regular empty minor accidents, routine transports, the slow burn of adrenaline that never quite leaves your bloodstream. She didn't expect the blood. Not like that. Not that much, Emily. Held a grocery bag in one hand, phone in the other. Thinking about leftovers, sleep. Maybe half a beer if she didn't pass out first. Her scrubs were stained from a morning call. Her ponytail was falling apart. She didn't care. She was off duty. Then she saw him. A man barely more than a boy staggering past the taco shop. Mid-20s, maybe younger. Blood soaked his side. His uniform, torn and limp, hung from his body like the remnants of something once proud. He didn't cry out. He just walked, dragging a leg. Clutching his ribs, nobody noticed. People scrolled their phones, laughed over nachos, chewed their dinner. The bleeding Marine was invisible. Emily dropped her bag. She didn't hesitate. Years of training kicked in like muscle memory wired to her. Heartbeat. Hey, sit down. You're bleeding. I'm an Emmett. He collapsed onto the curb. His name wasn't important yet. His blood was. She applied pressure, assessing his shoulder, ribs, side shallow breathing. Too fast. Internal damage, bruising. No time to wait. She called 911. Kept talking, kept him awake. Then came the men. She saw them out of the corner of her eye. Fast. One in a black hoodie, face mostly hidden. The other bald with neck tattoos, like inked warning signs. They weren't random. They weren't just passing by. They were hunting. Back off, one said. His voice was ice under gravel. Emily shifted slightly, blocking their view. He's injured. I've called for help. No one asked you to. The bald one sneered. Walk away. Her stomach turned. Something snapped into place behind her ribs. Not fear, instinct. The Marine tried to whisper. They followed me? That's all she needed. She planted her feet. You're not touching him. Back away now. The blade flashed in the dark. No warning, no words. Just cold metal and heatless rage. He lunged. For the Marine. Emily didn't think. She moved. Her body intercepted the knife. First in the arm, then her back. Pain flared. Bright and blinding. She screamed, but stayed upright. She grabbed his wrist, shoving him sideways, trying to get control. The other attacker kicked her hard in the ribs. She staggered, but didn't fall. Behind her, the Marine tried to rise, but collapsed again. More slashes, more pain. Her hands were slick with blood, hers and his. She was failing, but she didn't move from her position between them. Help! She cried. Somebody call 911. People watched. Some recorded. Only one voice shouted, Leave her alone. The attackers looked up, just long enough. They ran. Emily dropped to her knees. The Marine's head was tilted back, eyes fluttering. She pressed into his wounds. I've got you, she whispered. Stay with me. The sirens, finally, howled. In the distance, another Emmett appeared. Off duty like her. Hands replaced hers. Someone held her head, kept her breathing. Darkness swallowed her. But she didn't think about herself. All she could think was, don't let him die. Please, not him, Emily. Didn't wake up like they do in movies. There was no dramatic gasp, no sudden alertness. Just pain everywhere. Her body screamed. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Her vision narrowed to blinks of red lights, antiseptic, pressure on her wounds, voices. Emily, stay with me. You're almost there. She tried to ask about the Marine. Her mouth wouldn't work, then nothing outside. The scene unraveled like a crime thriller no one had scripted. Police sealed the area. Witnesses, shocked and shaky, gave confused statements. Security footage was handed over. One student, Luis, Stayed behind, he'd yelled. He'd been the one to distract them. She didn't even flinch, he told police. She jumped in front of the knife. In the second ambulance, Corporal James Rivas was semi-conscious, still clutching Emily's blood-soaked jacket. His life was hanging by threads she had tied together with her bare hands. If she hadn't stepped in, one paramedic muttered, he'd be dead. Doctors didn't call her a hero, not yet. They called her a miracle. 7 stab wounds, 1 collapsed lung, 2 fractured ribs, internal bleeding, hours of surgery, 4 pints of blood. But she lived. James did too. When Emily woke, truly woke, the pain didn't matter. The Marine, she asked with dry, cracked lips. He's alive, the nurse said softly. Because of you. She cried then, not from pain, from the ache of knowing it hadn't been for nothing. The man at the door wasn't a nurse. He stood tall, posture tight, clean-cut military. Emily Carter? He asked. His voice was formal kind. She nodded. I'm Captain Ramirez. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps and Corporal Rivas, I want to thank you. He reached into his coat and placed something on her tray. Small, heavy, bronze. Challenge coin. This isn't given lightly. But James insisted you receive it. Emily stared. I just helped. That's my job. No, Ramirez said. You stood between a warrior and death. That makes you one of us. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. But deep inside, something cracked. Not pain, not pride, something else, something no metal could name. Why was there silence when she opened her eyes? Not the sterile silence of hospitals. This was different, heavy, like the world had paused to see if she'd make it. Emily Carter blinked slowly. Her chest ached with every breath. Bandages crisscrossed. Her ribs, one arm wrapped tightly. Her throat was dry. Her voice barely a whisper. The Marine, she rasped. A nurse leaned in gently. He's okay. He made it. Thanks to you. Those words felt like air, like gravity lifted. She didn't ask about herself. She didn't want to. The pain told its own story. But hearing that he was alive, that was enough. Her body had fought through darkness and blood and silence. But her heart had never let go of one thing. He couldn't die. Not on her watch. Time blurred. A groggy drip of moments, tubes, oxygen, machines that beeped rhythmically. Like digital reassurance. At some point, her mother arrived, Karen, with tears already falling before she crossed the doorway. Her father behind her, stiff, silent, holding her hand with trembling fingers. I thought we lost you, her mother whispered. I'm still here, Emily said, barely. She didn't recognize her own voice. Her sister followed, carrying a bundle of cards and flowers. One card stood out, just 6 words, written in blocky pen. You saved one of ours. Thank you. She didn't know what it meant yet. Not until Captain Ramirez returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Corporal James Rivas stood beside him, cane in hand, bruises along his cheekbone. Slower, a little pale, but upright, eyes clear, alive. Emily tried to sit up. Pain bloomed immediately, but she smiled through it. You're okay. I am, James said. Because of you. He stepped closer, pulled something from his coat, a fabric patch, his unit insignia. Worn, weathered, important. This was mine, he said, placing it in her palm. Now it's yours. Emily stared. She didn't speak, couldn't. Ramirez said softly, it's rare. Civilians don't usually receive one, but what you did wasn't civilian. That was courage without armor, instinct without orders. You didn't run. That makes you one of us. The moment passed quietly, but the impact settled deep, because Emily didn't feel brave. She felt haunted. She was still in recovery when the video went viral. She hadn't seen it yet, didn't want to, but the world already had shaky cell phone footage, recorded from behind a food truck. A woman standing between 2 men and a wounded Marine. A knife glinting, screams, the moment the blade sliced into her side. The moment she didn't fall, the moment she shouted for help and still stood tall. That was the part that broke people. Not the wounds, not the blood, the stillness. The refusal to step aside. Overnight, it exploded. Hashtag Shield of Honor, #Emily Strong, #Hero, EMT military veterans reposted it with captions like, "That's what courage looks like." Late-night hosts honored her. News anchors called her the backbone of America. But Emily Carter? She turned off her phone. She wasn't doing this for the attention. She didn't want it. It made her skin itch, her chest tighten. She just wanted to breathe without flinching. The hospital installed security outside her room, not to keep danger out, but to manage the flood of strangers trying to leave flowers, letters, handmade gifts. One man drove 200 miles to leave a note. "I served 2 tours. I lost men. What you did was what we pray someone would do for us. You're one of us now." Those words hit her harder than the knife ever had. James was just 2 doors down. They hadn't spoken again since the moment he gave her the patch. But every day, he asked the nurses about her. Every day, she asked about him. On the 3rd day, he asked if he could visit. She said yes. He entered slowly, still leaning on the cane. "You okay with visitors?" he asked, voice low. "You're the only one that makes sense," she replied. They sat in silence, not awkward, but thick with the kind of unspoken bond that doesn't need explanation. They had both bled on the same sidewalk, both heard the same sirens, both saw death's shadow, and pushed it back. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Why were they after you?" James looked down, swallowed hard. "I got in their way," he said. "I reported something I wasn't supposed to see. They waited, found me alone." Emily nodded slowly. "Let it settle, until you weren't," she said. That line sat between them for a long time, unshaken, unfinished. The world was changing around her. Behind the scenes, the Marine Corps issued a statement. Officials began referring to her as a civilian embodiment of their core values: courage, sacrifice, and honor. She didn't ask for it, didn't even know about it at first. Then came a letter, hand-delivered, embossed with an eagle, globe, and anchor, from the Commandant himself, Miss Emily Carter. "Your act of selfless bravery reflects the highest traditions of duty, even without obligation. You defended one of our own with a courage we hold sacred. You will forever be recognized as a friend to the Corps. Semper Fidelis." She cried when she read it, not for herself, but because she realized it wasn't about her anymore. It never really had been. 4 days after her release, Emily returned to her quiet neighborhood, a narrow street lined with sleepy houses and overgrown hedges. She didn't want attention. Just her bed, her quiet, her peace. The first night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, though that was still there, but because every time she closed her eyes, she was back on that sidewalk. The knife, the blood, the Marine's pale face. She hadn't heard from James again. Not yet. She hoped he was okay, that he was healing. At 6:02 a.m., someone knocked on the door. Her mother answered and gasped. Emily hobbled into the hallway. What she saw made her breath catch. Across the lawn stood over 100 Marines, shoulder to shoulder, full dress uniforms, silent. Still, at the center, Corporal James Rivas, cane gone, just medals. She stepped outside, barefoot on the concrete. Breath shaking, they didn't speak. Then, all at once, the Marines raised their hands in salute. Perfect unison. Sharp, thunderous. Emily's knees nearly gave out. James stepped forward, voice steady. "You stood between death and one of ours today. We stand for you." Tears poured down her face. No words. Just wait. 2 Marines approached. One held a folded flag, the other a box. The flag was placed gently into her hands, a symbol of courage and sacrifice. The box opened. Inside was a challenge coin larger, heavier, hand-carved on one side, the Marine Corps emblem on the other. to the shield from those you stood for. I don't deserve this, Emily whispered. James stepped close. You earn more than this, he said. You gave without question. That's what makes a warrior. Behind her, her mother sobbed softly, and the Marines still in formation held their salute. Then someone from the crowd shouted, 3. Cheers for E.M.T. Carter. The Marines responded with thunder. Hurrah! Hurrah! She wept openly, and this time, she didn't try to stop it. James placed a hand on her shoulder. Firm, quiet. You didn't just save me, he said. Changed us. And row by row, the Marines disappeared into the morning light. No cameras, no speeches, just honor, just presence. Why did her hand shake when she reached for the doorknob? It had been a week since the salute. A week since 100 Marines stood in perfect silence to honor a woman who never asked for it. And yet, in the quiet of her home, Emily Carter still felt like an imposter, a fraud wearing borrowed valor. She wasn't a hero. She was just a woman who refused to look away. That should have been simple, but nothing felt simple anymore. Every movement ached. Her wounds, though stitched and healing, were deep, the kind that left muscle damage and phantom pulses. Physical therapy was cruel, slow, and humbling. Her grip had weakened. Some fingers didn't move quite right. And every day, she remembered how that hand once tried to grab a knife and failed to stop it. Failed to stop the pain. James Rivas visited once a week, sometimes more. Never stayed too long. Always asked before entering the room. His own limp had lessened, but his presence still carried the same quiet gravity, the weight of someone who had survived something he never expected to, and someone who hadn't stopped thinking about the woman who made that survival possible. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal rehab session, Emily walked through the door and slammed her bag on the floor. Her muscles screamed. Her patience cracked. She couldn't even open a damn jar of peanut butter. That's when James knocked. She opened the door barefoot. Scowling sore. What? She asked. He grinned and held up 2 large bags. Today, he said, we fight your greatest enemy. She blinked. What? Motor skills, he said. Marine-approved rehab. He dumped the bags on her living room floor. Lego sets, she laughed. A full, unexpected, broken laugh. Are you serious? He nodded. We're building a battleship. That night, they sat cross-legged on the rug. It took her 20 minutes to fit one piece. Her fingers fumbled, her wrist ached. But James never rushed her, never judged. He just passed her the next piece, over and over. When she finished the first section, she cried. Not from the Lego, but because she'd started to believe again that healing wasn't about speed. It was about still trying. A few weeks later, Emily returned to work. Not on calls, not yet, but light duty, training new EMTs, giving safety talks, filing reports. Her coworkers welcomed her like family. No big speeches, no applause, just quiet smiles, claps on the back, and coffee left on her desk. But outside, those walls, her name was spreading. Military bases, medical schools, fire departments. People began requesting her not to relive the attack, but to speak about what it means to stand up when you're not supposed to act without armor, to choose courage over comfort. One night, she was invited to a joint Army-Marine fundraiser, a ballroom full of uniforms, medals, politicians. She wore a simple black dress, no frills, no script. When she stepped to the podium, she took a breath, then spoke. I didn't have time to think, she said. Not about what I might lose, only about what I might save. The room was silent, and then standing applause. That night, as James walked her to her car, she leaned against the passenger door and whispered, Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I didn't stop that night? All the time, he said. They stood in silence, just looking at each other. Then he reached for her hand, the same one that caught a blade, and held it. No more words needed. The next morning, she received a formal envelope. wax sealed, from the Secretary of Defense. She stared at it for nearly an hour. Inside, an invitation to speak at Arlington National Cemetery on Armed Forces Day. A civilian among warriors, a voice for those who served without enlistment, but with courage, just the same. Emily didn't reply right away. She wasn't sure she was worthy of that stage. James walked in, saw the letter. "You going?" She nodded slowly. "If I can speak for the ones like me, the ones who didn't have a uniform, but showed up anyway." Washington was colder than she expected. The green cemetery grounds rippled with rows of white stones, flags waving, and silence so heavy it anchored your soul. Emily wore a navy blue dress and pinned the Marine Corps' emblem to her collar, her hair pulled back, her eyes clear but stormy. As she approached the podium, her legs shook. Then she saw them, third row, a wall of uniforms. The same 100 Marines who had stood on her lawn. They were here again. No orders, no cameras, just presence. "Family," she began. "I'm not a soldier," she said. "I've never trained in combat. I've never been deployed, but I know what it means to choose courage." She paused, let her breath settle. Sometimes courage is standing on a sidewalk, bleeding, and still refusing to move. Sometimes courage is dragging a stranger behind a dumpster, because you know they'll die if you don't. Sometimes it's just caring, when it would have been easier to walk away. "I didn't act because I'm brave," she said. "I acted because I could." She looked out at the sea of uniforms, at the families clutching flags, at the survivors, the widows, the children. This moment belongs to every nurse who stayed past her shift, every teacher who shielded students, every bystander who said, "Not on my watch." You don't need stripes on your sleeve to stand for something. You just need heart. The crowd stood, some saluted, some cried, and in the third row, a young cadet leaned to his friend and whispered, "She's the reason." I joined, after the ceremony. Emily and James walked hand in hand through the cemetery. At one grave, he stopped, knelt, placed a coin on the stone. "He saved me once," James said quietly. "Now it's my turn to pay it forward." They stood in silence. Then he turned. "You?" "No. They want me to help train the next generation. Leadership school. Teaching resilience." I said I'd do it. "On one condition." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You come with me." She laughed softly. "James, I'm not joining the Corps. Not as a soldier," he said. "As a speaker, a mentor, someone who proves that bravery isn't just about combat. It's about compassion." She stared at him, then smiled. "Yeah," she said. "I'm in." In the months that followed, her name entered textbooks and training modules. She toured bases and firehouses, spoke at schools and hospitals, hugged widows, shook hands with generals, and still came home to walk barefoot through the same neighborhood. The world had changed, but she hadn't, not really. She was still the EMT who dropped her groceries for a bleeding stranger. Still the woman who stood between a knife and someone who couldn't stand alone. Still the one who didn't wait for permission. To do the right thing, Emily Carter didn't chase recognition, but the world followed her anyway. Why was she afraid to walk past the taco shop? 6 months had passed. Enough time for reporters to move on, for hashtags to fade, for her scars to become quiet reminders instead of open wounds. But some places still whispered. Some memories didn't let go. Emily stood across the street, watching the spot where it all happened. Her fingers tightened around a single red flower. Her breath caught. She hadn't come back here. Not since that night. Not since the sidewalk became a battlefield. She didn't need to relive it, but she needed to face it. James waited by the curb. Giving her space, she walked alone, placed the flower gently on the ground, and whispered, "Thank you for letting me be needed that night." A little girl tugged at her jeans. "Are you the hero, lady?" Emily knelt slowly, her sides still stiff. "I'm just someone who helped." The girl smiled. "I want to help people too." Emily hugged her. Then, "You already are. Back home. The world had quieted, but not inside her. She was working again part-time, easing back into light emergency calls. Her team treated her like one of their own, not a viral headline, but behind the sirens and uniforms. Something still lingered, flashbacks, triggers, the smell of antiseptic. The sight of a uniform, the words stabbing over the radio. It sent her mind spinning, her breath short, her hands trembling. She never let it show, but it was always there, James knew. He didn't ask. He just stayed, one morning. As she struggled with a stubborn zipper on her jacket, her hand still not as strong as it used to be, he walked over and finished the zip without a word. "You don't have to fix everything," she murmured. "I'm not fixing," he said. "I'm just here." Sometimes that was enough. Then came the letter, wax-sealed, formal, government. Emily hesitated before opening it. Inside, an invitation from the White House. The president had heard her story. He wanted to meet her. She stared at the words like they were written in another language. At first, she thought it was a prank. But 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of her house. Real agents, real security detail, real destination, Washington, D.C., private ceremony. Not for politics, not for media, just recognition. Emily wore a navy blue blouse and flat shoes. She didn't want to stand out. But when she stepped into that room full of generals, cabinet members, Medal of Honor recipients, everyone turned toward her. She stood beside the president as he pinned a ribbon over her heart. "For extraordinary civilian bravery in the defense of life," he said. She didn't hear most of what followed. Her eyes searched the room for only one face. James stood in the back. He nodded. That was all she needed. That night, back at her apartment, Emily placed the medal on the shelf, next to her parents' photo and next to a tiny Lego battleship. James stood behind her. He didn't say anything. Right away, then, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to waste time anymore." Emily turned. "What do you mean?" "I don't want to just visit on weekends. I don't want to just say thank you. I want to be there, with you. For you." Her heart pounded. He wasn't just saying thank you. He was saying I love you without needing to say it. Emily smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee. James had beat her to the kitchen, wearing one of her old hoodies, humming horribly out of tune. He handed her a mug. "Morning, hero." She rolled her eyes. Still not a hero. He kissed her forehead. Still disagree. Later that day, she had an interview with a national magazine. She sat across from a reporter who asked, "What was going through your mind that night?" Emily paused, then said, "Nothing." The reporter blinked. "Nothing?" "There was no time to think," she replied. "There was just someone in danger, and I had 2 feet, 2 hands, and a heartbeat. That's all I needed." The quote went viral again. Even as the world moved on, Emily's story kept rippling outward. A woman in Arizona pulled an unconscious driver from a burning car. She told a local news station, "I thought of that M2, the one who shielded the Marine. If she could risk everything, so could I." Emily was stunned. She didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like herself, just trying to heal, trying to breathe. But she couldn't stop the stories from coming. Letters, emails, kids in ROTC, single moms, veterans. One note from a 12-year-old girl named Harper read, "You made me feel like girls can be strong too. When I grow up, I want to help people like you." Emily sat on the couch and cried quietly after reading that one. She didn't want fame, but maybe this was the kind of spotlight that helped change something. James had his own mission. Back at the base, he was on limited duty, helping with training, running resilience workshops, but every weekend, without fail, he visited her. They explored food trucks, sat by the pier, walked in silence when words felt too heavy. He started calling her M. She called him Trouble. Not flirting, just surviving. Together. But one afternoon, the air shifted. They were sitting on the beach, waves lapping gently against the sand. James stared out at the water. "They wanted me dead," he said. Emily turned to him. "What?" "That wasn't a mugging. It was a hit. Military intel confirmed it. I'd reported something I wasn't supposed to. They found out." Emily's jaw tightened. "And if I hadn't stepped in, I wouldn't be here," James finished. He looked at her. "They arrested the main guys. I've got protection until the case is closed." Emily leaned back on the sand. "So I saved a whistleblower. Great. Now I'm in a real action movie." He laughed. She did too. Then she smiled. And just like that, they found peace again between the moments that almost broke them. Later that month, she received another note, this time from the 2nd Battalion, a small box. Inside, a silver pendant with the Marine Corps' emblem, a card beneath it. "You're not just the shield, you're the heart. From all of us." Emily held it tightly, not like a gift, like a vow. Because the truth was, Emily Carter hadn't just stepped between a Marine and a knife. She had stepped between what the world expects and what it needed. She'd reminded people that strength has nothing to do with uniform and everything to do with presence. And though her body still ached, and her scars still stretched across skin and soul, she'd found something stronger than pain. Purpose. Why did it hurt more now that the noise had faded? The media had moved on. New headlines replaced her name. The world's attention span had run its course. But Emily Carter's wounds were still there, aching quietly, far from the cameras. 6 months after the attack, the chaos was gone. But the pain wasn't. She'd returned to her job in a limited capacity. A few emergency calls, mostly training, light work. But even the lightest moments felt heavy. Her ribs still throbbed on cold mornings. Her grip faltered when she tried to lift equipment, and sometimes her breath shortened for no physical reason at all. The flashbacks came like ambush. She could be brushing her teeth, and suddenly she'd hear sirens, screams, feel the blade again, smell blood, see his face, James pale, fading behind her. That helplessness, that fear, that was the worst part. Not the blade, the helplessness. One night, during a late call, she froze. They found a man bleeding near a loading dock. When Emily bent down, her body locked, her mind split in half. Her hands hovered, but wouldn't move. For 3 seconds, she couldn't breathe. She wasn't in the moment. She was back on that curb. And then her partner said, "Emily, pressure, now." She snapped back, finished the call, saved the man. But she cried alone in the ambulance after. Quietly, so no one would see, James kept visiting, even when she tried to push him away. "I'm fine," she said one day. "You're not," he replied. "And that's fine too." He didn't force conversations. He just showed up with food, bad jokes, random quotes from military training manuals. Once, he brought her a coloring book Marine-themed. She rolled her eyes. He grinned. "Stress relief," he said. Science-backed. They sat together for hours, coloring silence into something safe. One afternoon, Emily stood in line at a pharmacy. A stranger tapped her shoulder. "Are you her? The EMT?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. The woman's eyes welled with tears. She didn't ask for a photo, didn't want an autograph. She just said, "Thank you. I didn't think people like." "You still existed." Emily smiled faintly. "Sometimes we don't know we exist either. Until we have to." The next week, James had a surprise. He didn't knock, just texted, "I'm outside, bring your stubborn self." She opened the door, found him holding 2 helmets and standing next to a bike, an old military issue he'd fixed up himself. "You said you needed wind in your lungs," he said. "Let's go find it." She hadn't ridden in years, but she put on the helmet. And they rode through winding hills, sunset behind them, silence between them. It didn't fix anything, but for the first time in weeks, she smiled without trying. Later that night, she asked him something she'd been holding in. "Why did you keep coming back?" He looked up. "You mean after I almost bled out?" "No," she said. I mean, after the hospital, after the salute, after everyone moved on. He leaned forward, no hesitation. Because you didn't just save my life, you changed it. You reminded me why I joined in the first place, why we fight, why we serve. She said nothing. So he continued, and also, he smiled faintly, I like you more than I'm allowed to admit in uniform. She finally laughed, a real one. The months blurred together, seasons shifted. Emily's strength returned slowly unevenly. Some days she felt capable again, others. She couldn't open a medicine bottle without getting angry. But she kept going. Her face no longer graced headlines, but in classrooms, her story became a case study. Her name appeared in the NT training modules. She began speaking not as a hero, but as a survivor, a human. One night, after a community event, a young EMT walked up to her and said, I froze during my first trauma call. Thought I wasn't cut out for it. But then I read your story. I figured, if someone can get stabbed 7 times and still help someone else, I can get back out there. Emily didn't respond right away. She just pulled the girl into a hug and whispered, you don't have to be fearless. You just have to show up. James was offered a new role training leadership cadets. He hesitated, not because he wasn't ready, because he didn't want to go alone. So he asked her one quiet evening on the porch, would you come with me? Emily looked up from the tea-in. Her hands to base? He shook his head. To speak, to train, to mentor, with me. We don't need uniforms to make an impact. She smiled. I'm not done helping people, she said. Let's do it. On the anniversary of the attack, she returned to that curb again. No reporters, no flag waving. Just her, the flower. The memory, she sat in silence, and this time, it didn't break her. James waited across the street again, giving her space. When she stood, a small boy on a scooter stopped nearby. You're her, he said, pointing. You're the one who fought. The bad guys. Emily knelt beside him. I didn't fight, she said. I stood still. He thought for a moment, but you didn't run. She smiled. No, I didn't. He nodded solemnly and zipped away. That night, as James cooked dinner burning, most of it Emily stood quietly at the window. Watching the sky darken, she thought about everything that had changed. And everything that hadn't. She still flinched at sirens, still woke up some nights shaking, still reached for his hand without realizing. But she was alive, still standing, and now, no longer alone. That was something worth more than medals, more than flags, more than all the words the world could throw at her. That was hope. Why did her hands tremble before she stepped onto that stage? It wasn't fear of the crowd. Emily Carter had already spoken in front of Marines, generals, EMTs, strangers who now knew her name by heart. No, this was different. This time, they weren't here for her. They were here because of her. She stood just behind the curtain of a military auditorium, peeking at the rows of recruits in pressed uniforms, young, alert, still figuring out who they were. All eyes forward, back straight, boots polished. The future of the force. They'd been told they were meeting someone who had no rank, no battlefield experience, no combat medals, just scars and a story. James nudged her shoulder gently. You don't have to be perfect, he said. Just be honest. She nodded. That was the only way she knew how to live anymore. They'd been touring for weeks, now speaking at military bases, community hospitals, resilience conferences. Their story wasn't about heroics. It was about something more difficult. Showing up, bleeding, but showing up at one Air Force training facility. A 19-year-old cadet stood during Q&A and asked Emily, "What gave you the strength to act?" Emily paused. Then she said, "Honestly, I didn't think. I just saw someone dying and realized no one else was moving. So I did. Simple, brutal, true. But behind all the travel, behind the smiles and the story and the appearances, Emily was still healing. Her hand, The one that had once tried to stop a blade midair had regained most of its movement, but not all. Some days it trembled, others it stiffened completely. The doctors had warned her it may never fully return to what it was. She was learning to live with that, not as a defeat, but as a part of the cost. "You still sketching?" James asked one evening, noticing the pad by her knit-stand. Emily shrugged. "When I can, it's slower now." He picked up the pad, flipped through it. Inside were pages of faces, moments, her mother's eyes, a nurse's hand, the patch James had given her, the curve of the challenge coin from the Marine Corps. Each line was shaky, but every sketch was alive. They visited a base on the coast one weekend. Emily walked into the medical wing to find a group of young Navy corpsmen waiting, all sitting nervously. She recognized the posture. People expecting a lecture. She gave them none. Instead, she said, "Who here has frozen in an emergency?" Silence. Then one hand, then another. Then almost all of them. Emily smiled. "Good. That means you're human." She talked about adrenaline, about panic, about the guilt that follows hesitation. She told them what it felt like to lock up, even after years of training, and what it meant to forgive yourself and still step forward. One corpsman approached her afterward, red-eyed, barely holding it together. "I lost someone last year," he said. "I froze, and I never thought I deserved to be in this uniform again." Emily looked him in the eye. "You still do," she said, "because you're still showing up, and that's what matters." He broke down in her arms. She held him until the wait passed. Later that month, they visited a small rural town in Idaho, population under 2,000. No base nearby, no press, just a community center full of EMTs, firefighters, and volunteers. The room had folding chairs, bad coffee, and a wall with photos of local heroes. Emily didn't dress up. She wore jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, just herself. She didn't read from notes. She didn't rehearse. She simply told the truth. "What happened to me wasn't special," she said. "It was brutal and fast. But what matters is what came after, the choices to heal, the choice to keep helping." When she finished, a woman in the back stood and said, "My daughter saw your story online. Now she wants to join the fire department." Emily's throat tightened. That, she thought, was the ripple. That was the real legacy. Not the footage, not the medal. The quiet change, one person at a time, on a rare weekend home. James and Emily sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, watching planes disappear into the dusky skyline. They didn't talk much anymore about the stabbing. They didn't need to. Their silence was comfortable, solid. But that night, James leaned back and said, "There's something I never told you." Emily raised an eyebrow. He hesitated. "I still have dreams," he said. "About that night. About the moment I realized I wasn't going to make it. I saw your face, and I thought, I'm not going to make her die for nothing." Emily looked at him. "You didn't." He nodded, looked away, then back. "I want more than this." She tilted her head. "More? I don't just want to visit. I don't want to crash on your couch when I'm in town. I want to build something with you, a life, not just a story." Her breath caught, not because it was a surprise, but because she wanted it too. "I thought you'd never say it," she whispered. He reached for her hand, and this time, it didn't tremble. That fall, they moved in together. It wasn't flashy, no big announcement. Just boxes and bookshelves and coffee mugs mingled in the same cupboard. She brought her medals and her sketchbooks. He brought his old combat boots and an encyclopedic knowledge of bad 80s movies. They made it work, because after what they'd been through, of course they could. The Marine Corps sent another letter, this time about a training symposium. They wanted Emily to headline it, not because of what she'd done, but because of what she represented: civilian courage, the kind that doesn't wait for permission, the kind that doesn't need a uniform. James looked at the invite. "You ready for this?" Emily stared at it for a long time, then nodded. I think I'm finally ready to speak, not as the girl who got stabbed, but as the woman who survived. And when the day came, she walked onto the stage, no trembling this time. She looked out at the crowd, full of leaders and learners and future warriors. And she said, "You don't need combat experience to be brave. You don't need to wear a uniform to matter. You just need to stand in the moment when no one else does. You need to bleed without backing down, cry without giving up, shake, but keep holding the line. Because sometimes courage isn't loud. It's not perfect. It's not polished. It's just present." The room stood. She didn't smile. Not right away, but her heart did something better. It healed. Why did she keep every letter? The ones from Marines, from medics, from strangers who only knew her through a screen. The handwriting varied, bold, delicate, rushed, careful. Some were scrawled on notebook paper, others printed, folded, neatly typed. One was from a 10-year-old girl who drew her in a cape. Emily Carter kept them all, not because she wanted to be reminded of what happened, but because they reminded her why she was still here. It had been nearly a year. The chaos had settled. The headlines faded. The world had moved on, as it always does. But Emily had changed, not in loud ways. She still lived on the same quiet street, still drank coffee too late in the day, still tied her hair back into the same messy ponytail. But inside, everything was different. She no longer flinched when she passed the taco shop. She no longer cried when she saw uniforms, and most importantly, she no longer felt the need to apologize for surviving. She and James had built a rhythm, not a fairy tale, just real. They still had hard days. Some mornings he woke up tense, body stiff from old injuries. Some nights she jolted awake from the sound of a falling glass. But they gave each other room, and they didn't disappear. They were no longer just tied by trauma. They were building something. He called her M now without hesitation. She called him Trouble, even when he cooked breakfast without burning it. One morning, she stepped onto the porch and found a small package. No sender listed. Just a clean folded flag inside. Beneath it, a note. "My son didn't make it home, but I saw the video. And I saw you. I don't know why, but watching you shield at Marine helped me breathe again. Thank you for reminding me that sacrifice still means something." Emily sat down on the steps and wept, not because it hurt, but because it healed. They were invited to a joint Marine Army Resilience Summit. Not for show, not to retell the stabbing, but to speak about rebuilding, the part no one films. Emily stood beside James on stage, facing hundreds of enlisted men and women. She didn't rehearse, didn't hold notes, just spoke. "Sometimes the hardest part of survival isn't the moment itself," she said. "It's what comes after. The silence, the healing, the doubt, the guilt of wondering why you made it." She looked at James, then back at the crowd. "But that guilt doesn't get to win. You did more than survive. You stayed, and that means everything." The room didn't clap. They stood, quiet, unified. Back home, things felt smaller, but not in a bad way. The media requests still came, but Emily declined most of them. She didn't need a camera to tell her story. She had classrooms now, conferences, hospital wings filled with young EMTs who hung on her words. One day, a nurse wheeled in a young girl during one of her talks. The girl had burned scars on her arms. She was no older than 11. After the session, she rolled over to Emily and asked, "Do you still hurt?" Emily crouched down to eye level. "Some days," she said. "But hurting doesn't mean I'm broken. Just means I've lived." The girl nodded, then said softly, "I want to help people too." Emily squeezed her hand. "Then you already are." That night, Emily and James sat in bed, legs tangled under a patchwork blanket. A small lamp buzzed in the corner. The quiet felt earned. James closed the book and looked at her. "I think I know what I want to do next," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous sentence," he smirked. There's a leadership program they want me full-time, training future unit leaders. It's everything I've learned. But past forward, Emily smiled. So teach them. I want you there, he added. Not just visiting. Speaking, guiding, standing next to me. She stared at him for a long time, then nodded. Let's do it. Later that month, they were invited to Arlington again. This time, not to speak, to witness. A memorial service for fallen medics, those who didn't make it back, those who died helping someone else survive. Emily wasn't military, but she stood in the crowd. The sun sharp overhead, a pin on her collar that shimmered when she turned. Her head, after the ceremony, she walked among the headstones. James followed a few paces behind. At one grave, he stopped. She didn't ask who. He knelt, placed a coin gently at the base of the stone, and whispered something she couldn't hear. When he stood, he looked at her. You okay? She asked, softly. He nodded. I am now. That night, back at their apartment, James lit a candle and pulled something small from his pocket. It wasn't flashy, just a simple silver band. He placed it in her hand. Didn't say much. He didn't need to, and she didn't say yes. She just kissed him, and they both knew. 1 week later, a reporter asked her during a podcast, Do you still think of yourself as a hero? Emily paused, then smiled. No, heroes are ideas. I'm just a person who didn't walk away. She looked into the microphone, voice steady. There's power in standing still, in choosing not to let fear win. That night, I had nothing special. Just 2 hands, a heartbeat, and a decision. She stopped, then added, and sometimes, that's all you need. The host went silent, and across the country, people listened. Some cried. Others just sat quietly, letting her words settle into the spaces they didn't know needed filling. Emily Carter had never asked for any of this, not the attention, not the medals, not the letters or the honors or the roomfuls of people waiting for her to speak. She just wanted to help. But now, standing in the home she and James shared, a flag on the shelf, a coin beside the coffee pot, and a Lego battleship still intact on the mantel, she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't about being remembered. It was about reminding others, reminding them what strength looks like when it's quiet, when it's bruised, when it's too exhausted to stand but refuses to fall. She hadn't just survived. She had become something, a reason for others to believe again, and she wasn't done, not even close. Why was the sky so quiet that morning? It was the anniversary, 1 year to the day. Emily Carter stood at the edge of the pier, wrapped in a soft windbreaker, her breath visible in the early morning chill. The ocean moved beneath her like a heartbeat. Calm, relentless. Behind her, the world was waking up. Distant traffic. A barking dog, gulls cutting across a pale sky. But in this moment, it felt like everything had paused again. James stood beside her, not saying anything, just there. And that was enough. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the patch James had given her that first week in the hospital, faded now, edges frayed from being carried so often. She held it in her palm, stared at it, then whispered, It still doesn't feel real. James looked at her. But it is, he said. And it always will be. Later that day, they returned to the taco shop. Not for press, not for ceremony, just to finish the loop. Emily placed a single red flower on the curb. Same spot, same cracks in the concrete, same sidewalk where the world had changed. She didn't cry this time. She just breathed. A little girl with wide eyes approached her. Are you the woman who saved that soldier? Emily smiled. I'm just someone who didn't walk away. The girl hesitated. I want to be like you. Emily knelt down. Then start by helping someone. Anyone. Doesn't have to be big. Just has to be real. The girl nodded, then ran off. James reached for Emily's hand. They stood there together as the sun edged lower in the sky, streaking gold across the pavement where blood had once pooled. That night, a letter arrived. This one was different. Handwritten, sealed with a stamp. From a woman named Harper, 12 years old now. Hi, Miss Carter. I gave a speech at school about you. My teacher cried. I told them how brave you were. Not just because you saved someone, but because you didn't stop helping. Even after it hurt. I want to be an M now. I want to stand up when it's hard. My mom says you gave me a new dream. Thank you, Harper. Emily held the letter close to her chest for a long time. Not because she needed the praise, but because she needed the reminder. This wasn't about fame or bravery or standing on stages with medals pinned to her blouse. It was about that ripple, the girl, the soldier, the people who now believed, because she chose not to walk away. She and James were speaking more often now, not just at military bases, but at schools, trauma units, nursing programs. She'd become a voice not for what courage looked like, but for what it felt like when it hurt. And every time she stepped to a microphone, she wore the pendant the Marines had given her. Silver, etched with their emblem. She never called herself one of them, but they did, every time. And somehow, that meant more. On their rooftop, under a sky bleeding orange and purple, James handed her a cup of tea. She was sketching again one of the newer recruits from a base they'd just visited. He looked over her shoulder. You captured his eyes. Perfectly, he said. She shrugged. They always look scared before they realize they're ready. James sat beside her, watching her draw. Then he said something he'd never said before. I wouldn't have made it without you. Emily looked up. You did make it, she said. That's what matters. He nodded. But I made it because you reminded me who I was supposed to. She reached for his hand. That's all I ever wanted to do. Help someone remember their strength on the 2nd anniversary. She was asked to speak at a memorial service for civilians who died in acts of courage unarmed. Untrained, but present when it mattered most. Emily stood beneath a towering white arch. The wind cutting through rows of folding chairs filled with families who had lost someone. She looked out at them, mothers, brothers, kids in ill-fitting suits, and said, I am not a hero. I'm not extraordinary. I didn't have a plan that night. I didn't have training for knives or gangs or fear so thick it swallows your breath. I had feet that moved forward and hands that refused to back down. That's all. She paused. And sometimes that's everything. People wept. Some stood, others just nodded, eyes closed, holding tight to someone beside them, after them. Ceremony. She walked through the rows of names etched into the granite wall. She ran her fingers across the letters, not looking for anyone in particular, until she found one that stopped her. Unknown civilian died shielding a stranger, Emily. Placed her challenge coin at the base of the wall, then whispered, I stood for one. You stood for all. She and James got married in the spring. Quiet ceremony, backyard. Her father walked her down a short garden path. Her mother wept the entire time. James wore dress blues. Emily wore a simple white dress and tucked the Marine Corps pendant. Beneath her collarbone, a few Marines stood at the back. No formation, no speeches, just presence. That had always been the most powerful part. One night, long after the world had gone to sleep, Emily sat by the window, a journal open in her lap. She wasn't writing facts, just feelings. She wrote about the sound of a knife scraping pavement, the weight of a stranger's body collapsing against her, the sting of betrayal in a world where no one moved until she did. But mostly, she wrote about choice. The moment she chose to stand still, to bleed if she had to act, even if it meant not surviving. And what she learned was this: you don't need rank to show resolve. You don't need armor to protect someone, and you don't need medals to matter. Emily Carter would never stop carrying that night, but she no longer carried it alone, and she no longer carried it with fear. Now, it was something else, a vow, a quiet truth etched deeper than any scar. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The end.